50,000 volts of raw electricity cracked through the rain-soaked midnight air, lighting up the black asphalt like a jagged lightning strike and driving a decorated military veteran hard to his knees. Officer Derek Rollins stood over him with a sneer, certain he had just put another hard case in his place inside the wealthy gated enclave he patrolled like a personal fiefdom. He never noticed the man's calm eyes or the fact that every single order had been obeyed without resistance. He would realize the truth only when the flashing red and blue lights caught the polished edge of the military identification badge lying in the wet dirt. In that moment, Rollins had not merely assaulted a citizen. He had declared war on a two-star admiral of the United States Navy, and the full weight of the federal government was about to come crashing down on his small-town police department. The dashboard clock of the silver 2018 Chevrolet Impala glowed 11:47 p.m. Rear Admiral Thomas Edward Hayes, United States Navy, was bone-tired in the way only 34 years of continuous active duty can make a man tired. For the past 8 months, he had commanded Carrier Strike Group 9 in the Philippine Sea, threading carrier battle groups through tense geopolitical waters, carrying the lives of more than 5,000 sailors on his shoulders, and sleeping in 4-hour snatches that never quite restored him. Now, at last, he was back on American soil. All he wanted was the quiet of his home in the tree-lined, affluent suburb of Oak Creek, California, 20 minutes inland from the San Diego Naval Complex. He wore civilian clothes, a faded gray Navy athletics hoodie and dark jeans, and for the first time in months, he was alone with the rare, absolute silence of his own car. A light Pacific coastal drizzle had begun to fall, turning the pavement into a slick black mirror. Hayes nudged the heater one notch higher and listened to the steady thump-thump of the windshield wipers. He was exactly 3 miles from his driveway on Crestview Drive when the darkness in his rearview mirror exploded into a frenzy of strobe lights. Red and blue sliced through the rain. He exhaled slowly, checked the speedometer, 42 in a 45-mile-an-hour zone, kept both hands at 10 and 2, and confirmed his tags were current. Decades of military discipline held his heart rate perfectly steady. He signaled cleanly, eased the Impala onto the shoulder of State Route 114, and stopped precisely beneath the amber glow of a solitary street lamp. He shifted into park, killed the engine, and rolled the window halfway down. As a black man who had come of age on the turbulent south side of Chicago in the late 1970s, Hayes knew the unspoken choreography better than most. He flipped on the interior dome light and laid both hands flat on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread wide, completely visible. Behind him, the cruiser door slammed. Heavy boots crunched wet gravel. Officer Derek Rollins approached with his hand resting aggressively on the butt of his sidearm. Rollins was 26, 2 years out of the academy, and carried a dangerous cocktail of arrogance and deeply rooted prejudice. Inside the Oak Creek Police Department, he had built a reputation for being proactive, the polite bureaucratic term for racially profiling every black or brown driver who dared pass through their high-income zip code. A few paces behind him walked Officer Kevin O'Connor, a fresh-faced rookie who looked barely old enough to buy a beer. O'Connor hung back near the trunk, flashlight in hand, rain already soaking the brim of his cap, looking deeply uncomfortable. Rollins ignored the B-pillar safety protocol. He stepped directly up to the driver's window and jammed his heavy tactical maglite into Hayes's eyes from 6 inches away. License, registration, and proof of insurance. Now. No greeting, no reason for the stop, just a sharp, hostile demand. Hayes blinked against the white-hot beam, but never moved his hands. His voice came out deep, resonant, the same baritone that had once ordered billion-dollar warships through hostile waters, yet it remained completely calm and respectful. "Good evening, officer. My wallet is in my right rear pocket. Registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. I need to reach for them. Is that all right?" Rollins sneered, keeping the light pinned to Hayes's retinas. I didn't ask for a speech, pal. Hand over the papers. Stop stalling. I am not stalling, officer. I am making certain you know exactly where my hands are going before I move them. Slowly, deliberately, Hayes reached into his back pocket, produced a worn leather wallet, and slid out his California driver's license. He leaned across, popped the glove box, and retrieved the registration and insurance cards. He passed the small stack through the window. Rollins snatched them. He glanced at the name. Thomas Hayes. Where you coming from, Thomas? He used the first name deliberately, establishing dominance. I'm coming from the naval base in San Diego, heading home. I live about 3 miles up the road on Crestview Drive. Rollins scoffed loudly. Crestview Drive was a neighborhood of sprawling estates and multi-million-dollar homes. He tapped the roof of the Impala with his flashlight. You live on Crestview in this piece of junk? Sure you do. Whose car is this really? It is my car, officer, Hayes answered. The faintest edge of steel entered his voice. As you can see on the registration you are currently holding. We'll see about that, Rollins muttered. You know why I pulled you over? I do not. Busted right taillight, and you were swerving over the yellow line. You've been drinking tonight, Thomas. Hayes frowned slightly. I haven't had a drop of alcohol in 15 years, officer, and my taillights were checked and fully functional when I left the base an hour ago. You calling me a liar? Rollins's voice spiked. He leaned closer, invading the space, radiating hostility. I am stating a fact, Hayes replied, staring straight into the blinding glare. I am happy to step out and inspect the taillight with you if you would like. You don't tell me what to do, Rollins shouted, hand gripping his duty belt. You sit right there and keep your mouth shut. O'Connor, keep an eye on this guy. He's getting combative. O'Connor stepped forward nervously, rain dripping from his cap. Copy that, Derek. Rollins stomped back to the cruiser to run the plates. Hayes remained motionless, hands returning to the wheel. He knew exactly what was happening. He had lived it too many times in his youth, and it sickened him that after a lifetime of service to his country, he was still sitting on a dark road, being treated like a suspected felon simply because of the color of his skin. But Hayes was a master tactician. Anger was the enemy of survival here. He breathed in for 4 seconds, held for 4, exhaled for 4. He would let the officer run the plates, write his fabricated ticket, and then he would deal with the Oak Creek Police Department in the morning through official, devastating legal channels. Unfortunately, Officer Derek Rollins had no intention of ending the night with a ticket. Inside the cruiser, the mobile data terminal pinged. The Impala was registered to Thomas Hayes. No warrants, no criminal record, clean driving history. Rollins gritted his teeth. He hated when they came back clean. It made the justification harder to paper over. But he had already committed to the narrative, and his ego refused to back down. He looked at the man in the driver's seat, a black man in a hoodie driving through his pristine town, and decided he would not let him go without a lesson in respect. He keyed the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I'm going to need a K-9 unit at my location. Driver is acting suspicious. Possible narcotics in the vehicle. The dispatcher crackled back. Unit 4, be advised K-9 is currently on a call on the north side. ETA 45 minutes. Do you have probable cause for a search? I smell marijuana, Rollins lied smoothly. I'm going to pull him out and conduct a vehicle search. Copy, Unit 4. Proceed with caution. Rollins stepped back into the rain, which was coming down harder now, and marched to the Impala. All right, Thomas. Step out of the vehicle. His hand rested aggressively on his holster. Hayes looked at him, brow furrowing. Officer, for what reason am I being asked to exit my vehicle? Because I told you to. I have probable cause to believe there are illegal narcotics in this car. I smell marijuana. Hayes almost laughed, despite the gravity of the moment. Officer, I am a flag officer in the United States military. I am drug tested monthly. There is no marijuana in this vehicle, and you certainly do not smell any. The mention of the military registered nowhere with Rollins, who was too deep in his own adrenaline and bias. All he heard was defiance. "I'm not going to ask you again. Step out of the car, or I will remove you from the car." O'Connor stepped up to the passenger side, looking panicked. "Sir, please just do what he says," the young rookie pleaded through the glass. Hayes unbuckled his seatbelt. "I am complying," he said firmly. He opened the door and stepped out into the rain. At 6'2", he towered over the 5'9" Rollins. The sheer physical presence of the older man seemed to rattle the aggressive cop. "Turn around and put your hands on the roof of the car. Spread your legs," Rollins yelled, stepping back and drawing his X2 6P taser. Hayes turned, placing his hands flat against the cold, wet roof of the Impala. "Officer, I want to clearly state for the record that I do not consent to a search of my vehicle. You have no probable cause." "Shut up!" Rollins screamed. He stepped forward and delivered a brutal, unprovoked kick to the inside of Hayes' left ankle, trying to force his legs wider. Caught off guard by the physical strike, Hayes lost his footing on the slick asphalt. His knee buckled. His hand slipped from the roof. As he tried to catch his balance and turned to face the officer, Rollins found the excuse he had been hunting for. "He's resisting! He's coming at me!" Rollins yelled, even though Hayes was simply trying to stand upright. Before Hayes could utter a single word, Rollins pulled the trigger. Crack, crack, crack. 2 barbed darts shot through the rainy air. One buried itself deep in the chest of Hayes' hoodie. The other pierced the fabric near his abdomen. 50,000 volts of electricity surged through the Admiral's body. The pain was absolute and instantaneous, like white-hot iron spikes being driven into every muscle. Hayes' entire nervous system locked up. His jaw clamped shut. His eyes rolled back. He collapsed backward like a felled tree, hitting the wet asphalt with a sickening thud. "Derek, stop! He wasn't doing anything!" O'Connor yelled, rushing around the back of the car, eyes wide with horror. "Back off, O'Connor! He came at me!" Rollins screamed, holding the trigger down for a full 5-second cycle. Hayes convulsed on the ground, gasping for air as the electricity scrambled his brain. Rain pounded his face. When the cycle finally ended, he lay there, muscles twitching violently, trying to process what had just happened. Rollins gave him no chance. He lunged forward, grabbed Hayes by the hood of his sweatshirt, and violently rolled him onto his stomach. He drove his knee hard into the small of the 58-year-old man's back, pinning him to the ground. "Give me your hands! Give me your hands!" Rollins screamed, grabbing Hayes' right arm and wrenching it backward with enough force to threaten a rotator cuff tear. I am not resisting," Hayes choked out, voice strained and tight with pain. He allowed his arms to be pulled behind his back. The cold steel of handcuffs clamped down tightly around his wrists, biting into the skin. "You're under arrest, Thomas. Assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, and driving under the influence of narcotics," Rollins spat, panting heavily. He grabbed Hayes by the biceps and hauled him roughly to his feet. Hayes stumbled, legs still like jelly from the neuromuscular incapacitation. He looked at Rollins, dark eyes burning with a sudden, terrifying clarity. The calm was gone. In its place stood the cold, calculating fury of a man who had once commanded nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. "You have made a grave mistake tonight, officer," Hayes whispered, voice dangerously low over the sound of the rain. "Yeah, tell it to the judge, tough guy," Rollins mocked. He shoved Hayes toward the back of the cruiser, pushing his head down forcefully as he bundled the Admiral into the hard plastic back seat. He slammed the door and turned to O'Connor. The rookie stood completely still, pale as a ghost, staring at the dash cam mounted on the cruiser's windshield. "What are you looking at?" Rollins snapped. "Derek, he didn't do anything," O'Connor stammered. "He just slipped. I saw it. The camera saw it." Rollins grabbed O'Connor by the vest and pulled him close. "The camera saw him lunge at me after refusing a lawful order. That's the report you're going to write, Kevin. Or do you want the union to know you don't back up your brothers on the street? O'Connor swallowed hard, terrified of the older officer. He looked away, shame burning in his chest. Okay, Derek, okay, Rollins smirked. Good. Search his car, toss it, find something. O'Connor spent 20 minutes tearing apart the interior of the Impala. He checked under the seats, in the trunk, inside the spare tire compartment. He found absolutely nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no contraband. Just a meticulously clean car, a dry-clean suit in the back, and a leather briefcase. Nothing, Derek, O'Connor reported, standing in the rain. Whatever. Tow it. We'll get him on the assault charge, Rollins said dismissively. He climbed into the driver's seat, put the cruiser in drive, and sped off toward the station, leaving the Impala waiting for the impound truck. In the back seat, Admiral Thomas Hayes sat in silence. His back ached where the officer's knee had struck him. His chest burned from the taser darts. His hands were completely numb from the over-tightened cuffs. He did not speak a single word during the 15-minute ride to the Oak Creek Police Department. He did not curse. He did not threaten. He simply watched the rain slide down the reinforced glass of the window and meticulously planned the exact sequence of events that would dismantle the department piece by piece. The Oak Creek Police Department precinct was a stark contrast to the wealthy town it served. A brutalist concrete building from the 1970s with flickering fluorescent lights and a perpetual smell of stale coffee and industrial floor cleaner. Rollins dragged Hayes out of the cruiser by his handcuffed arms, frog-marching him through the back entrance and into the bustling booking area. Several other officers looked up as they entered. "Look what the cat dragged in," Officer Jenkins, a burly man holding a clipboard, called out. "Having a busy night, Rollins?" "Guy thought he was above the law," Rollins sneered loudly for everyone to hear. "Fought me on a traffic stop. Had to tase him." "Good job putting him in his place," Jenkins laughed, turning back to his paperwork. They reached the booking desk, manned by Desk Sergeant William Carter. Carter was a 20-year veteran, counting down the days to his pension. He barely looked up from his computer as Rollins shoved Hayes against the processing counter. "Name?" Carter asked in a monotone, fingers poised over the keyboard. Hayes stood tall, despite his bound hands and wet clothes. "Thomas Edward Hayes. Date of birth, August 14th, 1968, Carter typed. "Charges, Rollins?" "Assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, failure to comply with a lawful order," Rollins listed off proudly. Carter finally looked up, eyes scanning Hayes. He took in the gray hair at the temples, the disciplined posture, the calm demeanor. It did not fit the typical profile of a violent combatant. "All right, empty his pockets. Let's get him processed." Rollins patted Hayes down roughly, pulling out keys, a cell phone, and the leather wallet. He tossed the wallet onto the counter. "Take his cuffs off for fingerprinting," Carter ordered. Rollins reluctantly unlocked the handcuffs. Hayes slowly brought his arms forward, rubbing his raw, bruised wrists. He did not massage them for long. He placed his hands flat on the counter and looked directly at Sergeant Carter. "Sergeant," Hayes said, his voice echoing slightly in the busy booking room. "I am formally requesting my legally mandated phone call. I also strongly advise you to look inside my wallet before you officially enter those charges into your system." Rollins snorted. "Don't listen to him, Sarge. He's been running his mouth all night." But Sergeant Carter was an old-school cop. He had survived 20 years by paying attention to the details. The man standing in front of him did not sound panicked, and he did not sound crazy. He sounded authoritative. Carter reached for the wet leather wallet and opened it. The first thing he saw was the standard California driver's license. Behind it, in a clear plastic sleeve, was a solid, reinforced identification card. Carter pulled it out. It was a United States Department of Defense Common Access card. Carter's eyes scanned the information. Name, Hayes. Thomas E. Rank, ADM, Rear Admiral, upper half. Branch, U.S. Navy / active duty clearance, top secret /SCI. Carter stopped breathing. The color drained completely from his face, leaving him looking like a wax mannequin under the fluorescent lights. His hands began to tremble so violently that the heavy plastic ID card tapped against the laminate counter. "Rollins?" Carter whispered, voice cracking. "What?" Rollins asked, oblivious. "He got fake IDs in there or something?" Carter looked up from the card to Hayes. The man in the gray hoodie was staring back at him with an expression of absolute, terrifying calm. The look of a predator watching its prey step into a trap. "Sir," Carter croaked, the word foreign in his mouth in this context. Are you actively stationed?" "I am the commander of Carrier Strike Group 9, Sergeant," Hayes said clearly, ensuring every officer in the booking room could hear him. "I returned from an 8-month deployment in the Philippine Sea less than 72 hours ago. Your officer pulled me over without cause, assaulted me, deployed a less lethal weapon against me while I was fully compliant, and then illegally searched my vehicle." The booking room went completely dead silent. The only sound was the humming of the vending machine in the hallway. 4 other officers slowly turned around, eyes wide. Rollins laughed nervously. "He's lying. He's a thug in a hoodie." Carter slowly turned his head to look at Rollins. If looks could kill, the young officer would have been reduced to ash. "You stupid, arrogant son of a bitch," Carter hissed, voice trembling with sheer panic. "Do you know what you've done? Do you have any idea who this is?" He held up the Department of Defense ID. "He's a 2-star admiral in the United States Navy. He has top secret clearance. You tased a flag officer of the United States Armed Forces." Rollins physically recoiled, face dropping. No, that's impossible. He was driving a piece of crap Chevy. He lives..." "I restore classic American muscle cars as a hobby, Officer Rollins," Hayes interrupted, voice cutting through the panic like a scalpel. "And yes, I live on Crestview Drive. I bought the house with my military pension and my salary." Officer Jenkins, who had been laughing a minute earlier, slowly backed away into the hallway, pulling out his radio. "We need the chief right now. Call Chief Miller at home. Wake him up." Carter looked desperately at Hayes. "Admiral Hayes, sir, there has been a terrible misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, Sergeant," Hayes said. "Your officer acted with extreme malice, clear racial prejudice, and total disregard for the law. Now I will ask you one more time. May I have my phone call?" Yes, sir, of course." Carter scrambled, practically throwing Hayes' personal cell phone across the counter to him. Hayes picked up the phone. He did not call a local defense attorney. He did not call a bail bondsman. He dialed a 202 area code, Washington, D.C. The room watched in horrified silence as Hayes held the phone to his ear. "Yes, it's Admiral Hayes," he said calmly into the receiver. "Connect me to the office of the Judge Advocate General. Yes, I'm aware of the time. Wake him up. Tell him Carrier Strike Group 9 has a situation involving the unlawful detention and assault of a flag officer by local law enforcement. Tell them to scramble a legal team to Oak Creek, California." He paused, looking directly into Officer Derek Rollins' terrified eyes. "And tell them to notify the Department of Justice. We have a civil rights violation on our hands." Hayes lowered the phone. He looked around the precinct. "I will not be answering any questions. I will not be moving from this spot. You will not touch me again. My people are coming." Chief of Police Robert Miller had been asleep for exactly 2 hours when his phone exploded with frantic calls. He arrived at the Oak Creek precinct at 1:22 a.m., his uniform shirt hastily buttoned over a white undershirt, face pale and slick with cold sweat. He burst through the double doors of the booking area, ignoring the chaotic buzz of nervous officers, eyes immediately locking onto the man sitting on the wooden bench in the corner. Rear Admiral Thomas Hayes had not moved. He had refused the precinct's offer of a towel to dry his rain-soaked clothes. He had refused the local EMTs, who had been called to check his taser wounds, stating calmly that he would accept medical evaluation only from United States Navy personnel. He sat perfectly straight, hands resting on his knees, projecting an aura of absolute authority that made the dilapidated local precinct feel like a tribunal. "Admiral Hayes," Chief Miller stammered, rushing over. He practically tripped over his own boots. "Sir, I am Chief Miller. I cannot express how profoundly sorry I am for this catastrophic error. We are going to wipe all charges immediately. You are free to go. We'll have an officer drive you home right now." Hayes didn't blink. He didn't stand up. He simply looked at the chief with eyes as hard as forged steel. "I am not going anywhere, Chief Miller," Hayes said, voice a quiet, dangerous rumble. "And you will not expunge a single keystroke from your system. Those charges will remain in your database as a testament to what happened here tonight, until a federal judge orders them removed. As for your apology, you can save it. This is no longer a local matter." "Sir," Miller pleaded, lowering his voice, terrified of the officers watching. "It was a young cop, a rogue actor. He made a terrible judgment call. We can handle this internally. Professional courtesy between men of uniform. I will have his badge on my desk by sunrise. I swear to you." Hayes finally stood. Even in a damp gray hoodie, he towered over the chief of police. "Professional courtesy? Do you think this is about my ego, Chief? What happens to the young man without 2 stars on his collar who drives through your town? The one who doesn't have the Pentagon on speed dial? What happens to him when Officer Rollins decides he smells marijuana?" Before Miller could formulate a response, the heavy rumble of high-performance engines vibrated through the precinct's thin walls. Tires screeched on the wet pavement outside. Through the front glass doors, the local cops watched in stunned silence as 3 black-armored Chevrolet Suburbans with federal government plates aggressively boxed in the precinct's entry sequence. The doors flew open in unison. A team of men and women in dark suits and windbreakers poured out into the rain. Leading the pack was Captain Jonathan Reynolds, a senior attorney for the Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps. Flanking him was David Kessler, special agent in charge from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, San Diego Field Office, accompanied by 4 armed NCIS federal agents. They did not knock. They did not ask for permission. They breached the front doors of the Oak Creek Police Department like they were taking an enemy compound. "Who is the commanding officer of this facility?" Captain Reynolds barked, voice echoing off the concrete walls. He held up a leather binder bearing the gold seal of the Department of Defense. Chief Miller swallowed hard, stepping forward. "I am Chief Robert Miller. Can I ask—" "You are relieved of jurisdictional authority over this incident," Special Agent Kessler interrupted, flashing his federal badge. "Under the authority of the United States Department of Defense and the imminent authorization of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, NCIS, is securing this facility and all evidence pertaining to the unlawful detention and assault of a United States military flag officer." Officer Derek Rollins, who had been hiding in the break room, peeked his head out, face drained of all blood. "Agents, secure the servers," Kessler ordered, without looking back. 2 NCIS agents immediately jogged behind the booking desk. Sergeant Carter instinctively stepped back, raising his hands in surrender. "Hey, you can't just take our servers," Rollins yelled, a desperate, panicked reflex kicking in. "We have jurisdiction here." Kessler slowly turned his gaze to the young cop. "Are you Officer Derek Rollins?" Rollins puffed out his chest, though his knees were visibly shaking. "Yeah, I made the arrest." He resisted. "Officer Rollins, you are currently the subject of a federal investigation," Captain Reynolds stated, stepping forward. "You will surrender your body camera, your cruiser's dash cam storage drive, your taser log module, and your personal cell phone immediately. If you attempt to delete, alter, or withhold any digital data, I will personally ensure you are charged with federal obstruction of justice," carrying a penalty of up to 20 years in Leavenworth. "Chief, they can't do this without a warrant," Rollins pleaded, looking at Miller. "Give them whatever they want, Derek," Miller said, voice completely defeated. "It's over." As an NCIS agent approached Rollins to confiscate his equipment, a quiet voice broke from the back of the room. He told me to lie." Everyone turned. Officer Kevin O'Connor, the rookie, stood by the hallway, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. He was trembling violently. "Shut up, Kevin!" Rollins screamed, lunging toward his partner. Rollins didn't make it 2 steps. 2 NCIS agents tackled him to the linoleum floor with brutal tactical efficiency, pinning his arms behind his back. O'Connor ignored Rollins, looking directly at Special Agent Kessler. "My body camera was rolling the whole time. I didn't turn it off. Admiral Hayes never resisted. He slipped. Derek kicked his leg, and he slipped. Then Derek tased him. And there was no smell of marijuana. We searched his car and found nothing. Derek told me we had to lie on the report to justify the force." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the Oak Creek Police Department. The rogue cop narrative had just become a conspiracy. Hayes looked at the rookie. "Thank you, Officer O'Connor. That took courage." Kessler nodded to his agents. "Get Rollins's gear and call the U.S. Attorney's office. Tell them we have a cooperating witness." By 8:12 a.m. the next morning, the rain had stopped, but the storm over Oak Creek had only just begun. The story had not yet hit the local news. The military was meticulously containing the leak until their snare was fully set. Admiral Hayes had been transported to the Naval Hospital in San Diego, where military physicians documented the twin electrical burns on his chest and the severe contusions on his back and wrists. The photographs were immediately sealed and sent via secure courier to Washington, D.C. Word had reached the absolute top of the chain. The Secretary of the Navy was reportedly furious, placing a direct call to the Attorney General of the United States. At 9:41 a.m., an elite team of federal mechanics and forensic technicians arrived at the Oak Creek Municipal Impound Lot. They were looking for the silver 2018 Chevrolet Impala. Agent Kessler stood by holding a cup of black coffee as the lead technician, a seasoned mechanic named Greg, ran a diagnostic tablet into the car's OBD2 port. "All right, let's see what Rollins claimed," Kessler said, looking at the police report that had been seized from the servers. "Probable cause for the stop, a shattered right taillight assembly and erratic driving, crossing the yellow line." Greg walked around to the rear of the Impala. He wiped a smudge of dirt off the right taillight. "Well, that's strike 1, Greg said, tapping the pristine red plastic. "Original factory seal, no cracks. The bulb is perfectly functional. Hell, the filament isn't even loose." "Check the telematics," Kessler ordered. Greg tapped on his tablet, downloading the Impala's internal computer data. Modern cars were rolling surveillance devices, recording steering wheel angles, braking pressure, and lane departures. "Strike 2, Greg announced 5 minutes later. At 11:40 p.m. last night, this vehicle maintained a perfect 0-degree steering deviation on Route 114. He didn't swerve an inch. The car was driving like it was on rails. Rollins fabricated the entire stop. Meanwhile, inside the precinct, the atmosphere was a funeral. The DOJ Civil Rights Division, led by officials dispatched straight from Washington, had descended upon Oak Creek. They didn't just want the files from the Hayes incident. They wanted everything. Rollins, who had been stripped of his badge and gun, sat in an interrogation room with his police union representative, Frank Hodges. Hodges was a bulldog of a man who usually fought tooth and nail for his cops. Kessler walked into the room, sliding a manila folder across the metal table. "We pulled the data from your personal cell phone, Derek," Kessler said smoothly. "And we recovered the deleted items. It's amazing what the FBI Cyber Division can piece back together in a few hours." Rollins looked away, jaw clenched. Hodges opened the folder. Inside were transcripts of a WhatsApp group chat labeled The Gatekeepers. It included Rollins and 4 other Oak Creek officers. Hodges began to read. His face slowly turned gray. Rollins, October 12th. Caught another one of those urban youth driving through Crest View. Smelled weed. Tossed his car. Officer Jenkins, October 12th. Nice. Find anything? Rollins, October 12th. Nah, but I smashed his taillight with my maglite so it matched the report. Put him in cuffs for an hour on the curb to teach him a lesson. Rollins, November 4th. These people think because they get a little money they can drive through our town. I love seeing the look on their faces when they realize they have 0 rights here. Hodges closed the folder. He didn't look at Rollins. He looked at Kessler. Is this authenticated? 100%, Kessler replied. We also have dash cam footage from the October 12th incident where you can hear the audible crunch of Rollins smashing the kid's taillight off camera. He has a documented systemic pattern of racially profiling black drivers, fabricating probable cause, destroying civilian property, and utilizing excessive force. And your department covered it up. Officer Jenkins, Sergeant Carter, they all knew. Hodges stood up. He picked up his briefcase. Frank, where are you going? Rollins panicked, standing up. You're my union rep. You have to defend me. Hodges looked at Rollins with sheer disgust. The union protects cops who make mistakes in the line of duty, Derek. We don't protect racist thugs who hunt citizens for sport. You didn't just break the law. You tased an admiral of the United States Navy. You handed the federal government the key to dismantle this entire department. You're on your own. Hodges walked out, letting the heavy steel door slam shut behind him. By noon, the mayor of Oak Creek, Richard Ashford, called an emergency press conference at City Hall. Sweating profusely under the local news cameras, Mayor Ashford tried desperately to control the narrative. The city of Oak Creek holds its law enforcement to the highest standards. Ashford read from a shaking piece of paper. We have been made aware of an unfortunate incident involving a highly respected member of the military. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities, and the officer in question has been terminated effective immediately. But Ashford didn't know the full scope of what was coming. As he spoke, a fleet of black vans pulled up to the Oak Creek Police Department. FBI special agents wearing tactical vests swarmed the building. They carried out boxes of physical files, hard drives, and internal affairs complaints dating back 10 years. The Department of Justice wasn't just coming for Derek Rollins. They were initiating a massive pattern or practice civil rights investigation into the entire Oak Creek police force, citing a widespread, deeply rooted culture of constitutional violations. Back in San Diego, Admiral Thomas Hayes sat in his home office looking out over the Pacific Ocean. His chest was heavily bandaged, and he moved with a stiff, painful gait, but his mind was sharp. His phone rang. It was Captain Reynolds. Admiral, I have an update, Reynolds said. A federal grand jury in the Central District of California has just returned an indictment. Derek Rollins is being charged with deprivation of rights under color of law, aggravated assault, and obstruction of justice. The FBI just took him into custody in handcuffs. And the rest of them? Hayes asked quietly. DOJ is cleaning house. Chief Miller has been forced into early retirement. 3 other officers in that group chat have been suspended pending federal charges. Oak Creek PD is being placed under a federal consent decree. They won't be able to buy a new box of paper clips without a federal judge signing off on it, let alone pull someone over. Hayes looked down at his own hands, remembering the cold bite of the handcuffs. He thought about the thousands of people who didn't have a 2-star rank to protect them, who had sat in the back of Derek Rollins's cruiser, terrified, voiceless, and alone. Good, Hayes finally said. Let them face the judgment they earned. But the drama wasn't entirely over, because as Derek Rollins sat in a federal holding cell staring at the concrete floor, His defense attorney was preparing a desperate scorched earth strategy to save his client, one that threatened to drag Admiral Hayes's decorated military record into the mud. Federal charges of this magnitude against a law enforcement officer carried a near-certain conviction rate. But Derek Rollins was not going down without a fight. Backed into a corner by the FBI and the Department of Justice, Rollins's family liquidated their assets to hire William Crenshaw, a notoriously ruthless criminal defense attorney based out of Los Angeles. Crenshaw had built a lucrative high-profile career by defending the indefensible. He specialized in police misconduct cases, utilizing a singular, brutal strategy. He never defended the cop. He simply destroyed the victim. Crenshaw knew the body camera footage from Officer Kevin O'Connor was damning. He knew the WhatsApp messages were horrific. To win, or at least secure a hung jury, he needed to make the jury fear Rear Admiral Thomas Hayes. He needed to lean into the oldest, ugliest biases in the American subconscious. The smear campaign began 6 weeks before the federal trial. Crenshaw filed a barrage of aggressive discovery motions, demanding access to Admiral Hayes's unredacted military medical records, his psychological evaluations, and his deployment history. When the Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps fought the subpoenas on the grounds of national security, Crenshaw immediately ran to the press. "What is the United States military hiding?" Crenshaw declared on a primetime cable news broadcast, adjusting his expensive silk tie. "We have an officer, Derek Rollins, who was doing his job patrolling a high-crime corridor in the dead of night. He encountered a large, physically imposing man who refused to follow basic commands. My client used non-lethal force to neutralize a threat. Now the federal government is trying to crucify this young policeman to protect a high-ranking military official. We have sources indicating that Admiral Hayes may suffer from severe, undiagnosed combat-related stress. Was he having an episode? Did he pose a lethal threat to Officer Rollins? The public has a right to know." It was a masterful, malicious twisting of reality. Suddenly, fringe media outlets began publishing unverified hit pieces. They painted Hayes not as a decorated veteran, but as a ticking time bomb suffering from PTSD, an angry man who had used his size and military training to intimidate a young cop. The psychological toll on Hayes was immense. After 34 years of unblemished service, his reputation was being dragged through the mud by a lawyer trying to protect a racist. Reporters camped outside his home on Crestview Drive. Navy leadership, concerned about the optics of a messy public trial, gently suggested that Hayes might want to accept a quiet out-of-court financial settlement from the city of Oak Creek to make the headache go away. But Thomas Hayes was a man who had stared down enemy combatants in the South China Sea. He was not about to be intimidated by a slick Los Angeles lawyer. "I don't want their money," Hayes told Captain Reynolds during a tense meeting at the Pentagon. "I want Derek Rollins to stand in front of a federal judge and answer for his crimes. If they want to put my military record on trial, let them. I have nothing to hide." Meanwhile, the defense's intimidation tactics extended beyond the Admiral. Officer Kevin O'Connor, the young rookie whose testimony had blown the case wide open, began receiving death threats. Thin blue line extremists branded him a rat. Dead animals were thrown onto his lawn. His tires were slashed. The harassment grew so severe that the FBI was forced to place O'Connor and his pregnant wife into protective custody, moving them to an undisclosed safe house in Nevada. Crenshaw's strategy was working. He was creating chaos, muddying the waters, and planting the seeds of reasonable doubt. He was banking on the fact that when he finally got Admiral Hayes on the witness stand, he could badger, insult, and provoke the military commander into losing his temper. If Hayes snapped, if he raised his voice or showed even a fraction of anger, Crenshaw would point to the jury and say, "Look at him. Look at how aggressive he is." My client was terrified of this man. It was a high-stakes psychological game, and the courtroom was set to be the battlefield. The trial of the United States versus Derek Rollins commenced on a sweltering Tuesday, in the heavily fortified federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles. Judge Robert Harrison, a no-nonsense jurist with 30 years on the bench, presided over the packed courtroom. The prosecution, led by fiercely brilliant DOJ Civil Rights Division litigator Sarah Bennett, methodically laid out their case. They played the dash cam footage showing the fabricated traffic violation. They presented the pristine taillight. They brought the FBI cyber experts to the stand to read the horrific WhatsApp messages from the gatekeepers chat. But the entire trial hinged on day 4, the testimony of Rear Admiral Thomas Hayes. When Hayes entered the courtroom wearing his immaculate, crisp navy dress, whites adorned with 3 rows of ribbons and 2 silver stars on his collar, the air in the room seemed to shift. He took the oath, sat in the witness box, and answered Bennett's questions with precise, unwavering clarity. He detailed the unprovoked kick to his ankle, the surge of the taser, and the agonizing pain of the arrest. Then it was William Crenshaw's turn. Crenshaw strutted to the podium, a predatory smile on his face. He skipped the pleasantries. "Admiral Hayes, you're a big guy, aren't you? 6'2", 210. You've seen combat. You are trained to kill, isn't that correct?" "I am trained to defend the United States, Mr. Crenshaw." "Yes or no, Admiral? You are trained in lethal hand-to-hand combat." "Yes." Crenshaw paced in front of the jury box. "So, when Officer Rollins, a man much smaller than you, asked you to step out of the car, you felt insulted, didn't you? You thought, I'm a 2-star admiral. I don't have to listen to this local beat cop. You got angry. You got aggressive." "Objection," Prosecutor Bennett snapped. "Counsel is testifying." "Sustained," Judge Harrison said. "Keep to the facts, Mr. Crenshaw." Crenshaw ignored the reprimand, stepping closer to the witness box, invading Hayes's space. "I have your medical records right here, Admiral. In 2018, you were prescribed a sleep aid during a deployment. Were you experiencing stress? Were you prone to outbursts? When you stepped out of that car in the dark, didn't you tense your muscles? Didn't you drop your shoulder to lunge at my client?" Crenshaw was practically shouting now, face red, trying everything in his arsenal to make Hayes flinch, to make him yell back. Admiral Hayes did not blink. His posture remained perfectly rigid. He looked at Crenshaw not with anger, but with the cold, pitying authority of a man completely in control of his own soul. "Mr. Crenshaw," Hayes said, his deep voice carrying flawlessly across the silent courtroom, "I have commanded billions of dollars of nuclear-powered assets. I have made life-or-death decisions while standing on the bridge of an aircraft carrier in hostile waters, responsible for the lives of 5,000 sailors. If I lacked the basic impulse control to handle a minor traffic stop in my own neighborhood without resorting to violence, the United States Navy would have stripped me of my command decades ago." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into the jury. "I didn't lunge. I didn't resist. Your client violently assaulted me because he believed my life had less value than his ego. He was wrong." Crenshaw opened his mouth to fire back, but he had nothing. The angry veteran narrative had just been utterly annihilated by Hayes's flawless, unshakable composure. The jury wasn't looking at Hayes with fear. They were looking at him with profound respect. "No further questions," Crenshaw muttered, retreating to his table. But the DOJ wasn't finished. Sarah Bennett had held one final piece of evidence back, a devastating twist the defense never saw coming. She called the FBI lead forensic technician back to the stand. "Agent, during your investigation of Officer Rollins's personal devices, did you analyze his Apple Watch?" Bennett asked. "Yes." "Objection!" Crenshaw shouted, leaping up. "This wasn't in the primary discovery index. Your Honor, it was submitted in the supplemental index on Friday," Bennett countered smoothly. "Defense counsel had it. He just failed to review it." "Overruled," Judge Harrison said, glaring at Crenshaw. "Proceed." "Agent, what did you find?" Bennett asked. "Officer Rollins utilized an app on his smartwatch called Voice Memos," the agent explained. "The app is voice-activated. At 11:38 p.m. on the night of the incident, 4 minutes before he pulled over Admiral Hayes, the microphone was accidentally triggered when Officer Rollins was talking to himself in the cruiser. Bennett turned to the jury. Let's listen to what Officer Rollins was doing just before he claimed to have spotted a swerving vehicle with a broken taillight. The audio file played through the courtroom speakers. There was the hum of the cruiser's engine, the sound of the rain, and then Derek Rollins's voice, clear as a bell, dripping with malice. Look at this guy driving an Impala through Crest View. Think you belong here, buddy? Let's light him up. I'm going to ruin this guy's night. Watch this. A collective gasp echoed through the gallery. Rollins, sitting at the defense table, buried his face in his hands. He knew it was over. The audio proved premeditation. It proved malice. It proved everything. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned to the courtroom, the foreman read the verdict. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant Derek Rollins guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. 2 federal marshals immediately stepped forward, grabbing Derek Rollins by the arms and slapping handcuffs on his wrists. The heavy click of the steel was the exact same sound Hayes had heard on that rainy highway. Rollins looked back at Hayes one last time as he was led away. There was no defiance left in the young cop's eyes, only the terrifying realization that he was about to spend the best years of his life in a federal penitentiary. 6 weeks later, Judge Harrison sentenced Derek Rollins to 12 years in federal prison without the possibility of early parole. The Oak Creek Police Department was functionally dismantled. Under the crushing weight of the federal consent decree, the city was forced to fire half of its command staff, implement rigorous anti-bias training, and establish an independent civilian oversight board. Chief Miller's pension was severely reduced, and 3 other officers from the Gatekeepers chat pleaded guilty to lesser civil rights violations. Officer Kevin O'Connor was awarded a commendation for his bravery and was eventually transferred to a prestigious federal task force, his career salvaged by his willingness to tell the truth. As for Admiral Thomas Hayes, he didn't give any triumphant press conferences. He simply put his uniform back on, returned to the naval base in San Diego, and went back to work defending his country. But his quiet, unyielding stand on Route 114 had sent a shockwave across the nation, a reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed and often fought against, can still arrive with the force of 50,000 volts. The harrowing story of Admiral Thomas Hayes is a chilling reminder of how quickly power can be abused when the badge becomes a shield for prejudice. Hayes's flawless composure and unyielding demand for accountability didn't just bring one corrupt officer to justice. It tore down a systemic culture of abuse that had plagued a city for years. It shows us that true strength isn't found in violence, but in standing firmly in the light of the truth.